Welcome to Someone's Gotta Drive. I want to put a trigger warning out there that my podcast does include domestic violence, sexual abuse, and drug addiction with parents as well as spouses. While this podcast may be triggering, it can also be validating. In my last episode, I talk about how I left my ex-husband and moved to New Jersey for my current husband. And yeah, I cheated on my ex-husband with my current husband. At the time, I didn't know he was going to be my current husband. At the time, all I knew was that in the past 11 years that we had been together, as great as it may have started, the second we got married, it seemed like everything had changed. When I started that relationship, I had said blatantly, if you're going to get into drugs, this is not the life I want to live. And I didn't care if you drank, and I don't care if you smoke. But if you want to get into the hard stuff, the synthetic stuff, the heroin, cocaine, pills, things like that, consider me done, no harm, no foul. And for the first 5 years of our relationship before we got married, that's exactly how it was. Nothing big, nothing harsh. Maybe a drink here or there. Smoked plenty of pot. But the synthetic stuff never really came into play. And then it seemed like the second we got married, everything changed. And his excuse every time was, well, now we're married. Now you're stuck with me. And then shortly after that, I said, nope, that doesn't mean I'm stuck with you. And when I did get back together with him, he turned around and pulled the same crap again. The only difference was that time I was really trying to make this marriage work. After 5-6 years of that, I was done. I was done being the person that always had to work the full-time job or 2 jobs, sometimes 3, just to make ends meet. I was tired of being the one that was always the sober one. I was tired of being the one that had to always be the driver because, well, he could be nodding out behind the wheel. And when I left that day, I left with the only thing that the two of us owned. Because prior to that, I also wouldn't even buy a house with him because I didn't want to own anything together with him. The only thing we owned was that car, and I took it. Why? Because his license was suspended. It was in both of our names. And if he got caught driving that car, well, we were both going to get in trouble. And when I drove to New Jersey, all I could think of was how my mother had told him I cheated on him the first time I left. And how he threatened to kill me if he ever found me with someone again. And how he told me the only way out of that marriage was death. I thought about the fights that we had and how they could get violent, or how he would lock me in a room until I could, quote, calm down, instead of letting me go and walk it off on my own. And I thought about all the baggage and all the problems that just kind of kept happening throughout the past 6 years. And on top of all of that, I also thought about how during the hardest part of my life, watching my mother die, having to go through all her stuff, dealing with all my family drama, he wasn't there for me. He was just like, sucks to be you. And that was it. On my drive to New Jersey, after thinking of all that, I decided to call my dad and let him know where I was going, what I was doing, and that I'd be okay. And I even said to him, you want to come and see me in Jersey sometime? Let me know. And his response to me actually was, you don't have to worry about that. I won't be doing that. Okay, great. Thanks. Bye. Then I called my uncle, my mother's brother, and told him. And he was like, well, as long as I know where you are and I know that you're safe, that's all that matters. Great. And then I listened to music for the rest of the ride. I knew once I got there that was when my brother would be in someone else's car on his way to work. That person who had taken my brother to work that day had also been talking to my ex-husband for the past month. And my ex-husband kept telling him about how he was going on the streets to get extra drugs on top of the methadone that he was getting. And it just gave me even more solid validation on why I had been cheating and why I was leaving. And my biggest thing was, even if it didn't work out between me and who is now my current husband, at least I knew that I was still doing the right thing and I could make it on my own. If I could make it supporting my brother and my ex-husband and 2 dogs, one mouth to feed was way less than that. When I got to New Jersey, parked my car, and booked into my hotel room, I went ahead and sent that Dear John text saying, "I'm never coming back. I'm leaving you." And I turned off my phone. Call it the coward's way out. I knew no matter how I said it, no matter whether it was a phone call, a text, or straight to his face, that wasn't going to be the last I heard of him. I turned my phone off. I let my guy know that I was here. He came to the hotel to hold me and to make sure I was okay and promise that he wouldn't leave my side. And really, I needed that because even though I had only left my ex with $40 to his name, knowing it was $50 to get a train ticket to where I was, I also knew that he would try to pull whatever resources he had to come and find me. I ended up turning my phone on later on that night. I tried eating some dinner, but honestly, I had no appetite. I checked in with my brother and make sure he was okay, but I also saw the text messages and the voicemails that were then waiting for me when I turned on my phone. And trust me, they were not pretty. They were everything from, "I love you, please don't do this to me, how could you do this to me?" to, "You fucking bitch, I'm gonna come and find you and kill you, how dare you do this to me." Others were, "How am I supposed to survive? How am I supposed to eat? You left me with nothing." Meanwhile, he was getting unemployment, so I didn't leave him with nothing. I just left him with some cash to get him through the weekend till he got his unemployment check. But all the stories started making sense. He was going out and getting drugs on the street as well as methadone. Yep, there is the reason why, for some reason, I don't have any cash to pay my bills. And I wasn't what he loved. I was his meal ticket. I was the way he survived. If it wasn't for me working as much as I was, doing everything that I was doing, he wouldn't be able to survive because he was only working a part-time job because he, quote, couldn't work due to the methadone that he took. He could only work so much because he was sick. And that's when I started getting really, really angry when people said that addiction was an illness. Now, do not get me wrong. I feel for those who have addiction problems. I'm proud of those who get sober. And I feel for the ones who are sober and literally try their hardest to stay sober every single day. And know that if you're one of those kind of people, I am proud of you. And I can understand how it's an illness. But at the same time, I also saw it as a scapegoat. And I just remember all the voicemails and text messages that were coming in where he was, in one moment, he was, "I love you, please don't do this to me, let's work this out." The next minute it was, "You fucking bitch. How dare you do this to me? How am I going to survive?" And it was in that moment that I realized this isn't love. This is survival. That's what it was. And it ended up being that for the both of us. And at this point, I'm just trying to survive this. I turned my phone back off and tried to get some sleep. The next day, my gentleman was going to a global climate march in the city with a friend of his. But understand that I didn't know that I was even invited to go. I knew it was his plan, but I never anticipated it being my plan. He asked me if I wanted to go because I didn't want to impose on the situation. But sure, why not? I guess I could do something that I haven't done ever before. And honestly, the last time I had been in New York City, I was 17 years old, 16, 17 years old, going to a Broadway show with a high school boyfriend. So this was definitely going to be something a tad different. And while I had heard of his friends and they had heard of me, I also remember thinking to myself, what am I doing? I literally just left my husband yesterday and now I'm going off to, like, it was just so strange. It was so weird. I felt like I was supposed to be sitting in a hotel room, crying my eyes out, rocking back and forth, and trying to figure out what my next move was going to be. But really, I also understood that my next move right now is that I was safe. I needed to decompress. And honestly, I'm going to work on Monday morning. So this was nothing more than what I think a Sunday it was. And it was just go have fun, go try to get your mind off of this, and you'll figure out the rest of it later on. It was the first time I had taken a subway into the city. It'd been the first time that I took the subway in the city. And honestly, I remember getting off the subway and there would be all these news cameras around because it was a global climate march and all the major news stations were covering this. There were helicopters up above. And all I could think of was, as much as I didn't want my ex-husband knowing where I was, he's going to like watch TV or something and be like, there she is, and find the exact street I was on. I just was completely mortified, actually. And I remember walking past these cameras and like putting my hand up to try to like hide my face, because it wasn't just him at this point who knew I left. I was sure that he probably notified his family members, and you know, they might be out there looking for me as well. I remember us walking through the city and kind of being part of this march. And at one point, my guy looked at me and said, "Are you okay?" And I just had to look at him and say, "I seriously just left my ex-husband yesterday. I don't think I'm supposed to be okay." And he was like, "Valid." I also suffered from really bad anxiety as it was with everything that was going on. Now I'm putting myself in a very large crowd of people. I I just was completely outside of my element. But I also took the moment to soak it all in, to be the tourist, to look around, to watch the global climate march as it was going on, as we walked around to also be kind of part of it. It gave me a chance to meet his friends and the people that he was hanging out with prior to me showing up. And once it was all said and done, we made our way back home and we sat in his friend's kitchen for a bit. And I remember just telling him, "It's really been a long day. It has been a hell of a weekend. Can I please go back to the hotel room and not be around 20 million people and not, I just didn't want to be around people in general. I just wanted to be by myself. With him, fine, but I was just really done with being in crowds." And so we get in his car, and we're going back to the hotel, and I, had to admit to him, I actually don't really like being in crowds. I really don't like being in big social situations. And it was just a lot for one weekend to go from leaving my ex-husband and also meeting a bunch of people that I have never known before. And I'm sure I will hang out with them again, but it was just a lot for one weekend. And even he could agree, yeah, looking back, I guess that is a lot for one person for 48 hours. I checked my phone again because I was keeping it off texted my sister and my brother, let them know that I was okay and safe and to make sure everything was good with them, which they confirmed it was, and continued to get the nasty texts and voicemails from my ex-husband. I went ahead and turned my phone off again. Went home to my hotel room, tried to eat a little bit for dinner, and just think, well, tomorrow's another day. And tomorrow's the day I start working here in New Jersey. Because I had taken the car, I had actually asked my sister to take my ex-husband to his methadone appointments. And she had no problem doing that. At least that's what she said. And funny enough, that day, that Monday, she took him to his methadone appointment. She asked how he was. And he was just like, I'm going to show her. I'm going to become something better. I'm going to become a chef and I'm going to do all these great things with my life. And honestly, we were both kind of like, when I heard that and she heard that, we were both kind of like, well, isn't that the point? I finally gave him a call to let him know that I was okay, but to also explain, no, I am not coming back. And no, this hasn't been working. And the point behind us getting separated and behind me leaving is for us to do better apart. I'm not leaving him and I'm not leaving our marriage to watch everything fail and flounder. I'm leaving because this obviously is not working. And it's not working for me. He pulled but I love you. Let me come up there. We'll work this out. We'll figure this out. Or come home and we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out together. And as I just kept saying, I'm sorry, no, I'm not doing that. No, I'm not doing that. He would just get more angry and more angry. And the conversation that was going from kind and nice was then starting to go to nasty and screaming. And I would try my best to let him talk, but then it would turn into him name calling and calling me a bitch and calling me a liar and, how he's going to come and find me. And if I have another man, how he was going to kill me. And I turned around, just said, okay, I'm done with this conversation. And I would hang up. At one point, he had asked me, what am I supposed to do? I can't live without you. How am I supposed to live? I need money. And once again, just that confirmation that it wasn't love, it was survival. He didn't love me. He needed my money. He needed me to work so that way he could sit at home and work a part-time job and play video games all day. And I just finally said to him, you know what? Go where your dad lives. Call your dad, let him know I left, and tell him you need to come home. And that's exactly what he did. He called his dad, told him what happened. His dad sent him luggage. He packed it up, and he went home. But it wasn't without kicking and screaming along the way. I was then starting to get phone calls from my other sister, who I don't really talk to that much, wondering where I am and what's going on. And the reason why? Well, because my ex-husband called her and pulled we've separated, but can I at least be your daughter's uncle still? And tried pulling the card of, do you know where she is? Do you know what she's doing? And when I got that phone call from my sister, she was a little annoyed that I didn't tell her up front what was going on. And I just simply told her, I'm safe, I'm fine, I'm in New Jersey, and I do have my job, so I'll be okay. But that was all I was willing to say. And one of the reasons why was because I knew that this was going to happen. I knew my ex was going to call all my family members and say, where is she? I need to find her. Because every time I spoke with him, it was, I'm going to find you and I'm going to hurt you or kill you. And I wasn't trying to tell my family that that's what he was saying to me. But I knew deep down that's what the problem was. and that I had to be careful with what I told my family. They could know I was in New Jersey. They could know I was safe. Was anyone going to know that I was cheating on my husband, my ex-husband? No. Was anyone going to know exactly where I was? No. Because if he found me, I could have been dead. I also knew that working for a fireworks company, they were regulated by the ATF. The door to my office had a padlock with numbers on it. So if you knew the code, you could get in. I'll never forget one of the final conversations that I had that week with my ex-husband, where he said, "I'm coming to your office." And I said, "You do that. You come knock on this door and I'll have the ATF waiting for you." Because all the documentation, everything was for the ATF and the DOT. They go through it all, and I have to have it in a safe, secure place. So if you're going to come and tamper with that and me, I'll make sure that there's federal agents here waiting for you. There was just something about being in New Jersey, working for that fireworks company, and knowing my rights and how to protect myself now. Knowing all that gave me the strength I needed to move forward each and every day. At the same time, my guy was looking for an apartment because he was living with his parents and he wanted to get out on his own. And I really kind of felt like, well, now here we are, two people looking for apartments. But it was really strange. Why is he looking for a separate apartment when he's actually always with me? He was literally living with me inside this hotel, making sure that I was always safe, making sure I was always okay, making sure that he was still going to his classes too and living his own life that he had. But at the same time, he just included me with it. So it kind of felt like, with him also looking for another place of his own, were we going to move forward or are we moving backward? Kind of felt like we were already living together as it was. The hotel, even though it wasn't the most expensive one, still cost like $100 a day. It was definitely a lot more expensive than having my own apartment. And even though I was working during the day, the owner of the company also said, "Hey, take some time during the day and look for an apartment. It is part of working here. You transferred here. You can take some time during the day to look for a place." So that's what I did. I just kept looking for places, and it took about 3 weeks. But with the help of the fireworks company and my guy, I found a nice little place right about 2-3 miles from my office where I could call my own. It was a cute little studio apartment. No thrills, no frills. It was just basic and enough for me and him if he decided. I remember bringing him to the place and I said, "I think this is it." And he was just kind of like, "Okay." And it was like $900 a month. And I was maybe making $15 an hour, barely making minimum wage. And I'm like, "Look, this is what I can afford. And I'm about to go through a divorce and I have a car payment and I'm going to have to pay bills in Maryland, because I'm breaking a lease and I'm sure I'm going to have an electric bill and things like, left over that I'm still going to have to pay off and pay for. So it's going to take a little bit for me to really get this all like set up and squared away." And so he was like, "Okay, this isn't too bad and it isn't too far from the office." And it was actually owned by a private owner, a little family, and they didn't care that my credit was shot. Because that was another thing. My credit was completely shot. So horrible. Like, there was no way I was getting an apartment. I really thought I was going to be living in a car for a while. But I got really lucky with this place. I lived in the hotel for maybe a total of 10 days. And one of the things I made sure to bring up with me when I left my ex was my computer. For some reason, I just really, really dreaded opening that computer. But once I got my place, I was like, okay, well, I can move in a few days. So one night, while my guy was at a college class, I decided to open that computer and maybe start cleaning it up and cleaning it out. So I was probably going to be needing this computer to help me get through the divorce and everything else. And some of the things that were logged in were his email. And it was like logged into like Microsoft Outlook. So what was happening was, as I opened my computer and the email automatically generates open, so do all of the notifications of the emails that are coming in. And now I'm seeing emails from his email account coming in from Craigslist. And it showed that the day that I had left, he went on Craigslist and started finding prostitutes to sleep with. And in these emails, he's like, my wife just left me. I don't think she's ever loved me. I don't think our sex has been good. Like, it was all of that stuff. And, you know, women going, it's okay, baby. I'll love you. The whole 9 yards. Pictures. He was emailing them pictures of himself. It was really quite actually gross. And I will never forget my guy coming home to the hotel after class and he's like, are you okay? You look like you've been throwing up. Because I have been. Because all these emails started flooding my laptop of him talking with different prostitutes and how, and it was just gross. I was in such utter shock. And I don't know why, but I was. Because for me, it was like, here you were. I love you. Come home. I love you. Let's make this work. And like I said, all of the conversations would then end with him being irate and screaming at me and calling me names. So deep down, I really did truly know that I was just a meal ticket. I was just a way to survive. But this was just on a whole nother level. And it was kind of like the drug addiction all over again, where I don't know why I was always so just blindsided and flabbergasted that he relapsed all over again. But this in particular, having sex with just random prostitutes, started making me wonder, was he doing this while we were married? I didn't even want to look. I didn't want to know. It was just the solidifying, we are done. Never again. I made sure to delete his email address, anything that had to deal with any kind of correspondence from that email address in any way, shape, or form. If we had any kind of joint email address, I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to know about it. I didn't want to know. I kept all the correspondence in my own personal email because after a while, the conversations over the phone were getting so bad that I just said, I'm not talking to you anymore unless it's through email. Because I knew one day it was going to have to come up in some sort of court of law. And come my birthday, my guy decided to take me to Bushkill Falls and then out to lunch. And then honestly, we might have gone out to dinner, but if I remember correctly, that was at his family's house. And that's when I decided to announce onto Facebook that with the rest of the world that, yeah, I did have another guy. And shortly after that, that's when that email came in very handy. Not only did my ex-husband call me and leave me a threatening voicemail, he decided to email the very same words to me. And while I sat there, like I normally did, curled in a ball, shaking, worried that he was going to come and find me, I now had all the proof I needed that he was threatening and that he was going to try to find me and make sure that I paid dearly for this.